How you doing today, guys? Today I'm going to be sharpening my steel 046 chainsaw, which has something called Oregon Vanguard chain on it. And the interesting thing about this Oregon Vanguard chain is it's a full chisel chain, but it's also got really big safety bumpers on them. So it's supposed to be designed for people who are more new to chainsaws and the effects of kickback, but yet still give you that full chisel, really fast cut. I haven't actually sharpened the chain the saw came with because it was Vanguard and I didn't know how to sharpen it. But I figured it's the middle of winter, and rather than just throw the chain out, I at least give it an attempt to sharpen. Just for comparison's sake, I've got a full chisel chain here and I've got a semi-chisel chain here. And the first thing I want you to notice is the corner, the outside corner of the cutter on the full chisel chain has a very sharp 90-degree angle. On the semi-chisel chain, it's rounded off. And the result you're going to get there is on the full chisel chain, you've got this really sharp point that's just ready to dig into wood, whereas on the semi-chisel chain, you've got this more rounded point, which is also going to dig into wood, but it's not going to dull as easily if it hits a piece of dirt. What are the differences between your full chisel chain and your semi-chisel chain? Well, given the same wood and the same amount of sharpness, your full chisel chain is going to cut faster because it's got that nice point that's just going to dig into the wood. It's a very aggressive chain. It wants to cut into that wood. Your semi-chisel chain is going to cut a little bit slower. However, it's also going to keep its edge longer, so you'll have to sharpen this chain less often. And when you do sharpen a semi-chisel chain, it's going to be easier to sharpen because it doesn't matter if you have that nice fine point like you do on the full chisel chain. It's rounded, so as long as you put a clean edge on there, it's going to cut fine. Whereas with the full chisel chain, you really need to get that nice point when you're sharpening. If you can take away one thing from this talk we're having now, full chisel cutters have a sharp point and they have a square angle on them. Semi-chisel cutters have a rounded point and a rounded corner on them. Why don't we go ahead and start sharpening this chain and see if we can get her to cut by the end of the day. And the first thing I want you to notice is if you take a look at the cutter here, somebody really hit something with this chain. There's actually like a raised spot here. Now, because this is a full chisel chain, we need to file all this bad metal back until we have a nice sharp point. And the other thing I want to say is, you know, I have a video called 3 Chainsaw Sharpening Myths where I talk about how I like to file my chainsaw every tank of gas. And this chain is why I like to file my chain every tank of gas. This cutter here, the metal's raised. The next cutter back, the point is literally like squared off. I mean, there is no point. And it's going to take me about 15 strokes to get these teeth back to where they need to be. And I'm going to lose a whole bunch of my chain. Whereas if I had just gone ahead and sharpened this, as soon as either sharpen at every tank of gas, or the second you notice that saw is getting dull, touch up the edge on it. Don't wait till the end of the tank, don't wait till the end of the cut. As soon as you notice that chain's getting dull, put the file on it. Stop what you're doing and put the file on it. About 9 months ago, I switched to using just a bare file to sharpen my chainsaw. However, occasionally what'll happen is I'll sharpen the tooth too low and I'll get a little bit of a beak on my cutter. The beak is going to cut really nice for like the first 2 cuts, but it dulls very quickly and it leaves you with a very weak tooth that's likely to break. So if I notice that I'm getting a beak tooth, or in a situation like this, the file I use, or the file holder I use, is this guy here. All this does is basically just holds the file at a specified height above the teeth. Now, this file is pretty much the same as if you're using the file guide by Oregon. You see how if I put this one over, I can kind of see what I'm doing as I'm looking over here, whereas if I use this file guide, I mean, I guess you can still see a little bit of the teeth. Because this tooth is so destroyed, it's a little bit hard to get the file right where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tool to get my file in and kind of clean up that point. And we're just going to go ahead and run this file over the tooth and see if we can get that point back. And again, I think the rule of thumb is you want to have 20 or 30% of the file over the tooth, but I'm pretty much making that number up. To me, it's whatever feels right. Start with 20 to 30%. So we've got that tooth cleaned up. We've got a nice point on it. And now I can take my bare file and I'll give it some strokes to clean the gullet. And then now I've got that tooth where I want it. And now I'll do a couple strokes into the gullet to clean that out. So that tooth is razor sharp. It wasn't a big deal to do, didn't take too long to do. Now our next tooth is the one I really wanted to show you guys, because if you take a look, you can see that the tip of this tooth has been totally demolished. I don't know what they hit, but it's been totally demolished. So we're going to have to take that back a decent ways until we get a good point on that tooth. So I'm going to start with this file guide again. Work across the tooth. And I'm hoping you can see all the metal coming off as I file. Okay, so now we've got the point back. And now that I've got the point back and I've got the right height for the file, I can bring my plain file in and finish the job. And then the last 2 or 3 strokes, I'll go down. This is the last tooth we're going to do for the cutters. And normally I would have my hands like this when I was filing, but because I got the camera coming at this angle to show you what it looks like, I'm kind of holding my hand out of the way, hopefully. But we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to work this file in. And you notice how I pull the file out of the tooth and go back in? You don't want to pull the file against the tooth on the way back. You're just going to dull your file. Okay, so we got our point back on that tooth. And then I can just switch to my freehand file. A few strokes, clean up that point, and then I'll go ahead and clean out the gullet. And don't quite have the point on that one. So that is pretty much how we're going to go ahead and file the cutters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and file all the cutters on this bar, and then I'll flip the saw around. I'll file all the cutters on the other side. For a chain that's this beat, it's probably going to take me a good 20-25 minutes if I had to guess to file just the cutters. Again, because it's going to take a lot of metal. There's a lot of metal we're removing. But let's go ahead and I'll file the cutters, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to file the depth gauges and take it from there. I'm going to go ahead and put my magnifying safety glasses on. I got this tip from a channel called Tips from a Shipwright. I'll put a link to his channel down in the description, but it just makes things a lot easier to see. And then what I'm going to do to take care of my depth gauges is I'm going to use this tool right here. The standard Oregon tool is right here, and then I've got this tool right here. I got it at a place called Tree Stuff. So the Oregon tool, I'm pretty sure would work. You would just lay the tool over the tooth, and file any metal off on top, and then go to your next tooth and I will admit, guys, I'm starting to come around on just filing right on top of these depth gauge tools. You know, other videos I've shown where I would put the depth gauge tool on and run my file across the bar. Whatever I can do to save a little bit of time and make it more enjoyable to sharpen. So I've been leaving the depth gauge tool on. This tool here, which I got from Tree Stuff, is like an all-purpose depth gauge tool. And your depth gauges, you start at 25 thousandths, and then there's a hole here for 30 thousandths. This hole is 35 thousandths, and then this hole here is 40 thousandths. 25 thousandths is the end here. We just put our tool on top, and I'm doing this backwards so you guys can see. And whatever comes above, we're just going to file off. Now I want you guys to notice that because we're filing a Vanguard chain, they only want you filing more towards the outside of the depth gauge, and it looks like I got this one off a little bit. But there's actually like a little witness mark on the depth gauges that shows you should only be sharpening over here. So I am going to do my best to make sure I'm removing my metal from this corner over here. Now, because these depth gauges are so fat, there's quite a bit of metal to remove, and I'm noticing I'm taking, you know, significantly more strokes than I would with a chain with smaller depth gauges. But I'm just going to go around the chain and see if I can get all these depth gauges to about 25 thousandths. The box on the chain said that if you file the depth gauges below 25 thousandths on this chain, it's not going to make a difference. And I'm a little bit concerned. It seemed like they were leading me to believe that if my depth gauges went below 25 thousandths, the chain wasn't going to cut. I don't really see how that's possible, but we'll find out when we take it outside and give it a test run. But I'm just going to do what I've been doing, go around the saw and take all these depth gauges down to 25 thousandths, and then we'll put some fuel and oil in her and see how she does. Okay guys, we're going to be pretty quick about this. It's raining out, it's cold, and I don't want to be out here that long. But I just want to say that we are running a 20-inch bar with Oregon Vanguard chain on it. I have a steel 046, not a 460, not a 461. And this saw probably has not run in close to a year. So my prediction is it's going to take 7 or 8 pulls for it to cough, and then another 3 pulls to start. I'm going to take it over and cut some white oak, which is going to be close to 20 inches in diameter, and we'll see how this Vanguard chain does, or how my sharpening on this Vanguard chain does. Let's fire her up. Five pulls, she coughed. Take off the choke, push in the compression release. Guys, I think we have to call that one yet another victory because she was cutting very nicely. The saw cut extremely smooth with this Vanguard chain. I gotta say, it didn't feel grippy at all. I mean, it was full chisel. I don't know if you could see the chips coming out. About 5 feet behind, there's about 3 inches of chips after making 3-4 cuts. But it never felt like the saw was really grabbing into that wood. It just was smooth as butter. The last saw I ran with full chisel would have been my Steel 066. That had steel full chisel on it, which was also, it didn't have the safety drive links. It was full chisel. You had a depth gauge to control your depth, and that was it. And I gotta admit that full chisel, it gets grabby sometimes. Whether it's the way I sharpen it or not, I don't know. This Vanguard chain really, it's supposed to be a safety chain, and I think I would say it definitely is. Other than that, it smells like a winery. As I was cutting into this white oak, you got that white oak smell, like you know, the barrels they store the wine in. But would I buy the chain again? Well, I didn't buy the chain. It came with the saw. And I guess only time is going to tell on that one. I mean, I do like how smooth it is. It really is smooth. We'll see how much of a pain it is to lower my depth gauges. I don't think it's as finicky with the depth gauges as I initially thought it would be. The saw cut perfectly fine. I think the saw cut actually pretty darn good. But we'll see how much of a pain it is to file the depth gauges. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and call that a day. And thanks a lot for watching. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.